From the Rabbonon, so this is מצות Shabbos Pashas Miketz, Shabbos Chanukah, Tov Lamed Ches. Then the Rebbe hadn't, Yutis Kislev was the first time the Rebbe came down to Fabrengen, but otherwise the Fabrengens, he was already, from Yutis Kislev on, he came downstairs after the heart attack, but the Fabrengens were מצות Shabbos throughout the entire winter. Tonu Rabbonon, mitzvahs ner Chanukah. So the mitzvah of ner Chanukah, so the Mishnah says that the mitzvah is fulfilled one candle per household. Then the Mishnah says the Mahadrin is one candle for each member of the household, each adult male member. And the Mahadrin, Mina Mahadrin, so that's a machlekes. Beishama, Emrim, Yemrishin, Madlik, Shmoina. Beishama says the first night we light 8, Mikan, Ve'elech, Peiches, Ve'elech. And then it decreases. So the last night you're lighting 1. Beisilu, Emrim, Beisilu says that they're arguing in what's Mahadrin, Mina Mahadrin. What is the enhanced, within the enhanced way of observing the mitzvah? So Beis says, Yimrishim Madlik Achas, the first night you light 1, Mikan Ve'elech, Meise Ve'elech, and you keep on adding, so the 8th night there are 8 flames lit. Says the Gemara, time at the Beis Shammai, Keneget Poriachog. What's the reason the Beis Shammai says that we decrease in order? It corresponds to the 70 oxen that were offered on Sukkot in the Beis Hamikdash that decreased in order. There were a total of 70, and it decreased such in decreasing order. The time of the Beis Hillel, if I'm not mistaken, but 13 down. First day 13, 12, so on. The time of the Beis Hillel, the Ma'alim B'Kodesh, Beis Hillel says the reason is because we increase in holiness. Hence we add each night a flame. That's the Mishnah is quoted in the Gemara, and the Gemara's explanation on the reasoning, the respective reasoning of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. And it's not the question of the Alter Rebbe, what's the connection between ner Chanukah and the oxen brought on Sukkot? The question becomes stronger considering the following. Especially in light of that which the Tzemach Tzedek writes in the Torah, Shagam Beis Hillel pligi, be'emes Beis Hillel agree with Beis Shammai that it really should be corresponding to the karbonis of Sukkot. We don't, rak mishum the Ma'alim B'Kodesh, because we have another consideration. We should increase in holiness, hence we don't. What he's saying is the question is not only on Beis Shammai, the question is also on Beis Hillel, because Beis Hillel, Tzemach Tzedek explains, essentially agrees with this connection. And that which is explained in some places, what's the connection between Chanukah and Sukkot is because both are 8 days. Shmini Atzeres, 8 days. The mispar Shmoina Moira al B'china Shalamayna Mishtal Shalus. Mind you, I have a question on this. The karbonis over on Sukkot, not on Shmini Atzeret, it's Parach Adai Lechad, it's Bachlan, not part of that 70. So what's the connection? The connection is to Pariachag, and he's suggesting, and that which is known, the connection to Sukkot, which is 8 days, but the Pariachag are not 8 days. My question, Tzorich Iyon. At any rate, it's going to reject this suggestion, but first drawing the analogy. Both are 8 days of Chanukah, and Shmini Atzeres 8 days of Sukkot. I mean, the simple answer is that it's still connected. Shmini Atzeres is still the 8th day of Sukkot, so it's connected to the karbonis brought on Sukkot, even though the 70 end. But the emphasis is their ending culminates in the Par Echad. I'm answering my question. The Par Echad, Ayel Echad, that is brought on behalf of Cloud Yisrael. So that's still part of that descending order of the 70, corresponding to the 70 nations of the world. And then what? Eden. So you might want to suggest that's the answer, and that's the connection to 8, because the Mispar Shmoyne, Meire al Pchina Shalamayne Mishtal Shalos, the number 8 refers to that which is beyond the Ishtal Shalos. 7 are the 7 Midas, which are responsible for the 7 days of creation. That's the divine system, and 8 in general is beyond the system. So you might want to answer, that's the answer, that's the connection, because both Shmini Atzeres, or Sukkot as a whole, including Shmini Atzeres, of which the 70 oxen were an integral part of the Korbanos of Sukkot leading up to Shmini Atzeres, as we're explaining now, and Chanukah are both connected to 8. That's the answer why the Neiros should follow the pattern of the Parei HaChag. So, however, this itself you have to understand. Namely, Ma'al-Kesher, the Sukkot, v'Chanukah, the Pchina Shalamayne Mishtal Shalos. What is the connection between Sukkot and Chanukah? That both are beyond the Ishtal Shalos. They're both beyond the divine system. They're both 8 days. So why are both 8 days? So that the question remains unanswered. What's the connection to the Parei HaChag to Sukkot? We've expanded on the question now. The question to the Parei HaChag, the connection to the Parei HaChag, the oxen of Sukkot to Sukkot itself, and to the Shmoyne Yomim, the 8 days in both Yomim Tovim. You have to understand what that means. Why 8? The Gamma is the Gamma. Furthermore, another question. This that the Chacham established that we light the menorah b'nei Sha'aneshai b'neiris Hamikdash. It's all because of the nest that was in the base of Mikdash. Now the question is, Mekivin Shebemikdash HaYazayin, the menorah there had 7 flames, 7 branches. So Madur b'Chanukah Yeshmein Neiris v'Yamim. Why Chanukah is it 8 days and 8 candles? Now he sends us to a Maimer of the Fidik Rebbe, footnote 6, and says, the question is raised there, this Maimer Mai Chanukah of Tafshin Aleph of the Fidik Rebbe, and he adds Ayin Shom. See there. So the Rebbe says, see there. So go see there. So I saw there. And there he elaborates on the question, the famous question, and that is, it was only a 7-day miracle. There wasn't enough oil for 1 day. So if we're celebrating the miracle of Chanukah, it's 7 days, not 8 days. So the question is kind of too multi-layered. We are, number one, this menorah is a reflection of the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash. That was 7 flames, 7 branches. Ours is 8. Why? And furthermore, see there that even for the whole miracle, it's a 7-day miracle. Okay, there are scores, hundreds of answers to that question, but that's the question. Another question. We'll ask you all to summarize the question soon. We also have to understand, I'm not sure why they put that in Yiddish. It's such a hard word in Hebrew to hashva. Interestingly enough, the Neiris Chanukah who loyle chagas sukkos b'chalal. Okay, this is a question that was really not articulated before, but which we did. That the question is that the connection, the comparison, the analogy, the connection to Chanukah is not to sukkos in general, ela l'parei hachag dafke, but to the oxen. Now the question is a further question in that. What's the further question? Before we spoke about the oxen as part of Sukkot B'chlal. Now we're zeroing in, and we asked what's connection to Sukkot. Both are Shmoyne, so why both Shmoyne? Now we're zeroing in on this detail of what aspect of Sukkot? The Parei HaChag, and that's critical because the Parei HaChag, the oxen, diminish in order. So what's the problem? Neiris Chanukah recall the nest of the menorah. In brackets, Neiris Chanukah, the Neiris of Chanukah because of the Nesrat with the menorah. But the oxen, the 70 oxen, were brought like all karbanas on the mizbeach. So, the mizbeach and the menorah are two very distinct kelim. Before we read the bracket, so the question is, let's make the question clear. When they entered the Beis Hamikdash, they began Chanukah, they began to rededicate the Beis Hamikdash. They did all of the avodas. They did the avodas of karbanos too, of course. Menorah was only one of the things. The miracle happened with the menorah. There was no need for a miracle with the karbanos. You take a behemah, you shecht it, and you bring the karbanos. The daily offerings began immediately. There wasn't a problem with bringing the karbanis tamid. The problem was the menorah, because the oil was contaminated. So why are we marking and celebrating the ness of the menorah with an inyan that's connected with the mizbeach with karbanis? They're two separate inyanim. Yeah, question's clear. Bishamba is saying it's connected to the pariyachag, to the 70 oxen. That's a mizbeach thing. We're celebrating a menorah miracle. And he adds in brackets, they're not only the two different kelim, two different sacred vessels, especially explaining Kabbalah and Chassidus, they're different avodas altogether. And basically, it's explained that the mizbeach, which brings the behemoths offered on the mizbeach, so that is elevating the behemoth, the nefesh habahamis, which in general is klippas noiga. It's elevating klippa to kedusha. Whereas all of the avodas done in the kodesh, which is the mizbeach, the inner mizbeach, the menorah and the shulchan, as opposed to the outer mizbeach, kabbanis abroad, that's already in kedusha gufa elevation ever higher. In language of Kabbalah, the chotzer, where the outer mizbeach is elam habriya, and the kodesh is elam hatzilus. So one is elevating klippa, and the other one, that's karbanis, dealing with the animal soul. And the menorah is not dealing with the animal soul. The menorah is elevating the neshama. In the avodah, kedusha, gufa, the three different avodas in the kodesh, as explained in Kabbalah Chassidus, the mizbeach hazov, and the menorah, and the shulchan. At any rate, they're very different avodas, so that underscores our question: why are we marking, according to Beis Shammai, the mahadrim in a mahadrin of what? Of the ness of the menorah with an inyan that has to do with the mizbeach. Further question. And further underscoring this question, there's separate avodas, and furthermore, the natives were karbanis. Avodah shoynis, the two separate avodas, avodah the menorah and karbanis, so much so that we find that the Eibishter told Aaron, right, the beginning of Parshas Ba'aleischa, Rashi tells us that Aaron felt badly that he did not participate in the karbanis, the dedication karbanis that his tribe, the Levim, brought, which we're starting to read today for the Chanukah. Because they dedicated the Beis Hamikdash, part of which was the karbanos. That's the ikar, arguably. That's how we read this morning. Al Kaponim, so he felt badly. The Eibishter told him that what you do, lighting the menorah, don't feel badly, because you have the mitzvah ba'aleischa hanedes to raise up the flames, and yours is greater than theirs. Why, says the Medrash? Because what's them? Karbanis. They brought karbanis, but you have the menorah, because yours einam b'teilim lo'olam. Yours is eternal. Why is it never nullified? Because that's a reference to the menorah that we light. Even in the Zman HaGolos, we still recall the menorah. No longer karbanis. There's no physical act. There's no physical mitzvah connected with bringing karbanis, but there is the menorah. So we see they're very different. Karbanis, temporary in the Beis Hamikdash, and the menorah is forever. So why, according to Beis Shammai, are we recalling the miracle of the menorah with the inyan of karbanis? Separate avodas, and we see one is temporary, one's eternal. So the question is greater. More questions to come. So the Gemara says that when is the mitzvah? The mitzvah is at sunset, as the sun goes down. You can light before, but it has to burn into sunset. That's the ikar. If you do a diig bazeh, and it's not the question. Again, the whole menorah we're lighting is to recall the nest that happened with the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash. So therefore, the question is, the Neris Hamikdash idlikim plaga mincha. When did they light the Neris in the Beis Hamikdash? Plaga mincha, which is shorter via koydem mashkia. It's an hour and a quarter. Doesn't mean an hour. It means an hour you divide sunset to sunset, the 12 equal parts, called the shor zmaniyus. So an hour and a quarter before shkia, that's when they lit the menorah. So he's going to go on to ask the question. Okay, let's just continue reading. I'll just give you some more detail in this. The kivin sheneris Chanukah canal since the whole miracle, the mitzvah rather of lighting the menorah is to recall the nest that happened to the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash. So we'll just stop here for a second. We'll go further in a moment. So surely the Chachamim should have enacted it to be observed it the same way, as much as possible, as observed in the Beis Hamikdash, and the mitzvah should be from sunset, not before sunset, an hour and a quarter before sunset, not sunset like we light al menorah, but rather should reflect the way it's written in the way it was lit in the Beis Hamikdash. So just to refresh your memory, what is this? He's talking about plaga mincha. Plaga mincha. What's plaga mincha? Just to refresh your memory, there's mincha gedola. It's all related to when we daven mincha. There's two opinions. We daven mincha basically in replace of the afternoon korban tamid, which can be brought, and it wasn't when Erev Pesach fell on Friday, so then they brought the korban tamid very early, so everybody should get their korbanis in before Shabbos. So the earliest time is a half an hour after midday. It's midday, but the Chachamim were afraid people would confuse the time, so they made it half an hour later. This is called mincha gedola. Mincha gedola is the great mincha. It's half an hour past the midway point, and one can daven mincha then. But ideally, one should daven mincha ktana. What's mincha ktana? Mincha ktana reflects the time when, on an average day, the afternoon korban was brought, which was 9.5 hours into the day, not 6.5 hours into the day. 6.5 being like 12:30, about 3:30. If we're going to take an hour, if a day is 6 to 6, which it rarely is, but sunrise 6 and sunset 6, so using those numbers, 3:30. So that's mincha ktana. That's from 3:30 to 6, which is then sunset. Then there's halfway point between mincha ktana and sunset, which is like 5:45, an hour and a quarter. You've got 2.5 hours between 3:30 and 6. Divided into half, it's an hour and a quarter. So that's mincha. That's plaga mincha. Midway point between mincha, the small mincha, and shkia. According to Rabbi Yehuda, that was the deadline for bringing the afternoon korban. In fact, he says that really mincha corresponds to ktoiris, and ktoiris, the incense, was brought at plaga mincha, which means that mincha was over before then, and the daily incense was brought afterwards. And it's after that the menorah is lit, right at this point. Look at the ha'orah. Look at order number 11. Okay, this detail. If you don't get all of it, it's all right, but these are familiar ideas to us. So look at order number 11. The question: Neres Hamikdash they lit from plaga mincha, which is shorter via koydem mashkia, an hour and a quarter before shkia. Footnote 11. See Rei Lechem Mishnah, Hilchas Tefillah, Lechem Mishnah on the Rambam, Perigim Halacha Beis, Haktoires, the incense, Shemaktirin Achar Atom Shabein Arbaim. When did they bring the Ktoires, which is after the afternoon korban? Hoya Kola was over. B'Yud Aleph Shoyis Chasar Revi at this hour, Plaga Mincha. It was over at the 11th hour minus a quarter. At 5:45, you put it in contemporary, in using the classic 60-minute hours. The Nimtza. So, because when did they light the menorah? Right after Ktoires. Shegam Azman the Neiris Shoylachar Ktoires. So that's the time of the lighting of the menorah, which is after the final thing that was done. Every day in the Beis Hamikdash was the lighting of the menorah. In the evening, it was done after Ketore. So when is that? An hour and a quarter, bottom line. An hour and a quarter shows manias, seasonal hours, before Shkia. So why are we lighting the menorah? The Chachamim, no, you light it Shkia. We should be lighting it earlier, reflecting the way it's lit in the Beis Hamikdash. And he adds in brackets, a Befrat, next page, Kuf Aleph. Yeah, I think you have the same page as me. Pardon?
The fact that Torah's ended at that point.
Yes. That's the time you light the menorah.
Because Torah's was done.
Yeah. The lighting of the menorah was right after the Ketores, and the Ketores was done by Plag HaMincha, so the Zman was by Plag HaMincha, so the Zman, the time of lighting the menorah is Plag HaMincha. Again, the midway point between the small mincha and Shkia, an hour and a quarter before Shkia. That's the bottom line. So why are we lighting it at Shkia, an hour and a quarter later? Well, Befrat, he adds in brackets, so you're going to say that, okay, that's the way it is. The lighting the menorah is Deiraisa, has its rules, and this is the Chachamim. They made the lighting of the menorah. It doesn't have to follow exactly the way the menorah was lit. But he adds, yes, Befrat, Shekol Tikun, Rabbonon, everything which the Chachamim enacted came Deiraisa Tikun. They enacted it similar to the parallel Torah law. Just give you one example of that. One example. Every day, a kohen had to immerse himself in a mikveh before he began the avodah, even if, as far as he knows, he's pure. There's no need. Didn't come in contact with anything impure. Didn't have any emission that would render him impure. Nonetheless, he has to go to the mikveh every morning. Why? The Chacham enacted this. Because by going to mikveh, it's a reminder. Maybe there was an impurity in the past that he never really purified himself from. And therefore, if he didn't, he has to go to the mikveh and wait till evening, because to attain ritual purity, taharas, we're learning now all the halachas. So there's even the one-day tumas. You don't become tired as soon as you're immersed in the mikveh. You've got to wait till nightfall. So we make him go to the mikveh just as a reminder that maybe there's an old tumah that he never dealt with. So today's mikveh will purify, but don't start into now. You got to wait till tonight, and then you'll go at night or you go tomorrow. It's just a reminder to think back. Is there any old tumah that he may have come in contact with? It's purely a reminder. Nonetheless, the halacha is that all of the laws of mikveh apply. Any chtzitza, immersing in the mikveh, if there's anything interposing between the skin and the water, the mikveh, the tefillah is invalid. So the halacha is that the immersion has to be like any other tefillah, like any other derais. Why? It's just purely a reminder. This is not a mikveh for tahara. It's a reminder. Nonetheless, it's an example of Ka'ain, Deiraisa Tikun, when the Chachamim make an enactment for whatever cheshbon they have. Go to the mikveh, you'll go to the mikveh the way that you go to the mikveh in a case where the Torah mandates it. It always follows the Torah mandate. So here, the Chachamim are enacting what? We should remember the miracle that happened to the menorah. So they should have enacted the way, as much as possible, the way it's observed. It was observed in, and then, which is lighting it when? At sundown. Right, so the question is stronger. Why did they pull back the time? Therefore, it would appear that when should the Chacham have established the time to light it, like the Beis Hamikdash, namely, we should light it at Shkia. Before Shkia. Well before Shkia. So why is the mitzvah davka when the sun sets and not earlier as they did when they lit the menorah and the Beis Hamikdash? Okay, friends. So let's review the questions. Look at the page. First question is, it's line number 4. We're zeroing in on whose opinion, ostensibly? By Shammai, but not only by Shammai. By Shammai says what? Just review. He says, how do you do Mahadrin, Mina Mahadrin? You start 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. And the Gemara says, what is this? Why? Corresponding to the Pariachat, the oxen and sukkahs. What did Tzemach Tzedek add? It's not just Beis Shammai.
Still agrees, but because of Manamina Kodesh,
He still agrees, Bemis really should, because of another consideration, we should always increase in holiness, we'll go the other way. And what's the question? Al Rebbe asks, what's the Shaila? What's the connection between the oxen and sukkahs and Chanukah? And even if you'll answer the connection, it's because both are what? Both sukkahs and Chanukah connected to what?
it is
8 days, and number 8, and 8 is what? L'maylim b'shtal shalos, and both are connected to beyond the system, 8 being beyond the system. Therefore, that's the association between the Menorah, Chanukah, and Sukkot. But that just begs the question, why are these two Yom Tovim Dafka connected to the number 8? Next question. Where he told us to look at the Fidigat of his Maimer. Another question. So the Chachamim, the whole mitzvah is to recall what the Menorah in the Beis HaMikdash problem. And there were 7. Why are we lighting 8? And if you're going to say, well, it was an 8-day miracle, he's kind of implying that, see there, but it was an 8-day miracle. No, it wasn't. There wasn't enough for one day. There wasn't enough oil for one day. So it was a 7-day miracle. So why are we lighting it 8 days when it was a 7-branch menorah in the Beis HaMikdash? Next question. What's B'chalal, the connection between, going back to Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel? Yeah. Pardon?
Nothing. I said, what's the connection between Chanukah and Sukkot?
That's he asked before. Now he's asking not just Sukkot, the korbanos of Sukkot, Pariachad, the oxen. That's the question now. And he elaborates on the question. The Pariachad, what are they? They are korbanos brought where? On the Mizbeach. Where's the Mizbeach? Or just in more detail, in the outer courtyard, in the Azorah. And the menorah is not korbanos, it's not a Mizbeach. And where is it brought? In the Kodesh. And especially, so the 2 separate kelim. That's number 1, the 2 separate sacred vessels. Especially up in Kabbalah and Chassidus, 2 separate avodas. What's the avodah of korbanos? To elevate what? Nefesh HaBaham is the animal soul, Klippas Noiga. And what's the avodah of the menorah? Likewise, the Shulchan and the Mizbeach Hazov. That is what? That's all in Kedusha Gufa to go higher and higher. As I said before, the Azorah is Elam Abriya, and Kodesh is Elam Atzilus. Kodesh HaKadoshim is already Atzmus and stuff. So it's 2 different worlds. And especially adds another detail. What did the Eibush tell Adam? Underscoring the question. Yours is higher. Don't feel bad that you didn't participate in the inaugural korbanos of the Mishkan. You have the lighting of the menorah, and that's forever. That's forever in our lighting of the menorah. So the question becomes stronger then. Why are we talking? What's the connection between the 8 days, or the way we light the way we light the menorah according to Beis Shammai, and we still agrees in essence. We correspond to Pariachad. That's korbanos. That's Mizbeach. Here we're talking menorah and the Kodesh. 2 separate avodas. Next question, the timing. Final question. What's the final question? When did they light the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash? Flag HaMincha, which is how long? An hour and a quarter in seasonal hours before when? Before an hour and a quarter before Shkia. That's when they lit. And yet the Chachamim enacted, when do we light the menorah? Dafka when? Mishatishka Chamba, when the sun goes down. If you'll answer, this is the Rabbonon, that's the Reis. They don't have to match. Answer is they do have to match. Because when the Chachamim, when Mesaken and Takana, they do so, Ke'ein, the Reis, Tikun, or Tokun, they establish it always paralleling the Reis, the Torah law. So this is a reflection of the Torah law to light the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash, the Reis. You should reflect it as much as possible. Let's go a bit further. Yeah. Starting the answer now.
Rabbi, what about the Asar Tefachim? Wasn't mentioned. one is above and the Chanukah is below Asar Tefachim.
Start again. The what?
Asar Tefachim. That's
What do you-
another question. I don't know if it's brought up. Is it mentioned in the Maimer?
No, it's not. But what do you elaborate on the question?
It's not a question. It should be a question. The menorah in the base of Mikdash was higher than 10 Tefachim, and here we light Chanukah under.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, that's questions brought in other Maimorim, not here. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, not mentioned here. So now let's just begin our answer. When the kudas abir bazeh, I mean, there's obviously a diak why that question is not raised here, but it's not. So the explanation, the nekuda, the inyonim shal Neiros Chanukah, the whole point of Neiros Chanukah is what? Lahoyer es hachoshech, to illuminate the darkness. The miracle happened after the Yevonim entered into the Heichal, the Timu kol hashmanim shebeichal, and they contaminated all the oils of the Heichal. Sheis gabrus hachoshech, that the overpoweredness of the darkness in brackets of the Yevonim, was to such a degree, the loyd action nichnasu leheichal v'timuhu. Not only did they enter to the Heichal and contaminated the sanctuary itself, the Heichal, he's going to explain now, but they contaminated all the oils, and explained in a moment the diuk, the oils. But I just want to look at order 14. He said, he's associating the Yevonim, the Greeks, with darkness. So he says, Lahoyer, order 14. Midrashas Chazal v'choshech zegolus Yovam. The in Bereshis Rabbi, the Medrash says there as follows. The pasuk says in the beginning of creation, the land was toihu v'avoyu. So toihu, desolate, goes on Golus Bovel. Voihu goes on Golus Modai, the Persian Golus. Haman means the psukim associating. Haman, Vayo means also like hurried. Haman was brought hurriedly to the Yavila. They brought him to the king hurriedly. King hastened him. And Bavel, Toiho, because the Mechanetza mixed up the whole world. And then V'choshech al pnei Sahoim, that's Golus. Choshech is Golus, Yovan is the Greek Golus. Al Pnei Sahoim, on the face of the great depth, that's the final Golus, Roimi, our Golus. And the Medrash continues, the famous Medrash, V'ruach Elokim Meracheves Apnei Amoyim, and the Spirit of Hashem hovered over the waters, says the Medrash, Zuruch Shel Mashiach. That was the Spirit of Mashiach, which is also very telling that at the very outset of creation, the whole end goal is factored into creation. This is the very beginning, when it's all things are nebula and unformed, that Ruach Elikim Merachevas Al Pnei Hamoyim. But at any rate, what do we see there? The association between Choshech Dafke and Yovam, and the Golus Yovam. They sought to bring enlightenment, and what were they? The ultimate Choshech. As he goes on to say, they didn't just contaminate the Heichal by placing idols in it and so on. But I just said that, yeah. Also the oils. What? Okay, we'll just start this. We'll continue tomorrow. The Shemen of B'chinas Kodesh. Shemen is holy. Where do we see the association with the oil and holiness? Moshe Kosov, as the pasuk says about the anointing oil that Moshe Rabbeinu is to use to anoint all of the Kalim and the Kohanim and the Leviim at the very outset. Shemen Mishchas Kodesh, the Torah calls it a holy anointing oil. And what's holiness? Says in Zayar, Kodesh Mila Begarmei. Kodesh is something on its own. The word Kodesh means removed. Kodesh is something on its own, in brackets, like oil, floats on top of all other liquids and doesn't mix with them. We'll continue tomorrow. Even this level of kedusha, which is removed, oil, shem and mishnas kodesh, that they also contaminated. That's how deep the darkness was. So we'll continue Be'ez Hashem tomorrow.